welcome to the last week of October, but it is not the last week of Makai-World reviews for Halloween, here with Itsuno Makai, Master of Minds and of Men, but I'll get to that in a second. Today we will be finishing up the look at the first 20 episodes of the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror specials, with episodes 16 through 20 being gone over today. But on October 31st, Halloween Day, I will be back with an episode where I rank every single story from worst to best of the past 20 episodes. I know I'm not the first person to do it, nor will I be the last, but damn it, I'm going to do it. Now, I've not seen any of these episodes, so let's not beat around the bush too much. Hit that subscribe button, go ahead and like too, and let's get to it. Episode 16 from season 17 2005, we open on a really exhausting baseball story that was honestly unfunny. It took about 3 minutes, and I just didn't enjoy it. I do not like these big time-wasting openings they've been insisting on. Story number 1, B.I. Bartificial Intelligence, based on the flop movie AI Artificial Intelligence. Bart is massively injured, so the Simpsons get an AI boy to replace him. They grow to love him more than Bart, who has recovered from his coma. Homer drops Bart off in the woods, where other robot castaways are, but they make friends. Bart actually steals their parts to build a mech suit and gets revenge against his family. But in the end, it's a dream by Homer, who is possessed by the devil. Homer's car is domed, much like the one he invented in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Much like this movie, this was overwritten and poorly executed. It wasn't like it was the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was boring, and the two endings did nothing for me. Just have Bart kill his family, or a showdown with the robot kid. The dream sequence was stupid and felt like they needed just to pad more time after the padded intro. Story number 2, Survival of the Fattest, based on The Most Dangerous Game, a famous short story. Mr. Burns, a good choice here, wants to hunt some men, and besides every other man in the series, one of those men is Homer Simpson. Burns succeeds in killing most of the men by himself, except for Homer, who evades capture until Burns and Smithers are seemingly killed by Marge from some frying pan shots. Homer and Marge then have sex. So it was a little wacky, like over-the-top wacky, but it was still a fairly good story. The violence could have been more exaggerated, and I would have liked that better. Give me a little more gore, and the stuff we had felt a little too cartoony and less Halloween-y. There were some highlights, though. Apu being killed, then reincarnated as a hare, then killed again was good. Homer eating Professor Frink, but they've only been there for like 6 hours, reminded me of the inexperienced cannibal from Kids in the Hall, and Lenny dying and is sent to heaven, and his heaven is just Carl. Was pretty good. It had one huge glaring issue. The TV coverage stuff, like it was a sport. I hated it. It felt like padding. It was a narrative structure we didn't need in the story. Let it just be Burns murdering people. And I guess you could say it's so Marge knew what was going on, but she knew from the beginning, since they talk about it at the table at the beginning, oh, Mr. Burns is going to kill you. It came off as childish and a reason to get a celebrity, Terry Bradshaw, in the episode. Unnecessary celebrity cameos is something that hurts The Simpsons a lot, and it's present here and brings down an otherwise decent story. Story number 3, I've Grown a Costume on Your Face, based on the Twilight Zone episode, The Mask. Great episode. It's Springfield's Halloween party and everyone has a costume, but they run afoul of a witch who turns all their costumes literal. After seeing some of the backlash, Maggie, who was dressed as a witch, now is a witch, turns everyone into binkies and flies off. This is really more of an exhibition of ideas for characters than it was any kind of actual story. And there were a few interesting costumes. The mayor was Mayor McCheese, and he was eaten by dogs. I liked that. Patty and Selma were two sides of a horse. Skinner was G.I. Joe, complete with sans genitals. Martin is the king of the fairies. But most otherwise, they were pretty generic. Spider-Man, R2-D2, nothing that really had anything to do with the character's personality. Chief Wiggum is Jared from Subway, and that didn't really age well. I don't know, it wasn't a story. It was fine as a collection of ideas they wanted people to see. That's about it. Also, its connection to the Twilight story is vague at best, and none of the understanding or the moral implications of that story. Episode 17 from season 18 2006. We open on a pretty good Tales from the Crypt opening with Mr. Burns. Actually, one of these I like, and they kill Moe. It's not that long. Story number 1, Married to the Blob, based on the Blob movie franchise. A meteorite rockets down from space, and it's a green blob, which Homer eats for some reason. He soon gets an insatiable hunger, but when food is not enough, he turns to people, trying to eat the population of Springfield. Dr. Phil shows up to help, but to no avail. Finally, Sadie just hires him to eat the homeless. Dr. Phil, and they make us think about it. Homer, the literal rampaging monster, stops and go, Dr. Phil McGraw? Like, why? Why do this? This was a perfectly boring story before we had unnecessary celebrity cameo number 912. He added nothing to the story. He did nothing. Why? They also used the parody of the Sir Mix-a-Lot song, Baby Got Back. The song came out in 1992. It's 2006. Come on. There's too much stupidity in this story. Too much lip service. It really sucked. Story number 2, You Know When to Golem. Famous silent film franchise, The Golem. A little bit of lost media on the first one, and arguably one of the first real film franchises. Bart finds a golem in Krusty's props department, and after some backstory learns it works when you put a scroll in its mouth. So Bart uses it to get the usual Bart things, mostly harassing bullies, his dad, and killing Principal Skinner. The golem is given the ability to talk, as well as a wife, whom the Simpsons make out of Play-Doh, and they seemingly live happily ever after. I'm a fan of The Golem, how he came into the world film. I believe the original is lost in some capacity, as I mentioned, and the second is a short film, so that gives it a few points, as they didn't do anything to damage the original. I'd also like to say this is the appropriate way to use a celebrity. 2 of them, actually, make them characters, not just, oh, it's Richard Lewis and Fran Drescher. No, they played characters, and that's what they were. Like, that's what they were for in the right environment. Just having random people show up isn't entertaining. Richard Lewis is a golem cracking Jewish jokes. That's right up my alley. We also get some fun stuff in this. The Golem flashbacks, which is much like the 1920s film, shows him wrecking shit, but this is presented far more like an Arnold Schwarzenegger film than The Golem, which was kind of funny. Killing Skinner was great, as well as Homer acting sinister on what he wants the Golem to do, and it's just open a jar of pickles. I enjoyed this one quite a bit. It was funny, had some good violence, and an interesting premise, though why Play-Doh and not just regular dough? I don't know. Story 3, The Day the Earth Looked Stupid, based on War of the Worlds, even though the name comes from the day the Earth stood still. 1938 in Springfield, and War of the Worlds is playing on the radio, as read by Orson Welles, which makes the people freak out. Literally, they devolve into nude animals writhing around in the mud after a riot. Kang and Kodos, who we've not seen in an actual story for a while, come to conquer Earth thinking it's ripe, but they find the humans are far tougher to fight back against. This story didn't go anywhere. It didn't have an ending. It ended on a ruined Springfield. Well, I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots plays. Felt very Fallout, but Fallout is better. They make an Iraq joke. I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to get from this. The beginning and ending parts have no real correlation. It's like they ran out of time. This was a non-segment. Episode 18 from season 19, 2007. We open on Marge killing topical Fox TV characters and serves them for dinner. Okay. Story 1, E.T. Go Home, based on E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and let's say Mac and Me. Kodos plays the part of the mild-mannered extraterrestrial trying to contact home, except he's totally evil. He tricks the Simpson kids into helping him open a portal to his home world to prepare for an invasion. But once the infiltration begins, the U.S. government comes and kills all of them, sans Kodos, who is taken to be dissected. Once again, we don't get where the once-right aliens are from, which is just a pet peeve of mine. Kodos gives Homer a butt massage in the shower, a very sexy scene. The aliens that come through all have different outfits, like beards and eye patches and mustaches. It generally reminded me of like the Citadel of Rick. I enjoyed that. In fact, this was generally a pretty enjoyable story. Not much to it, but it had a few chuckles and moved along pretty smoothly. The resolution was quick, but these don't have a ton of time to drag things out. Yeah, perfectly acceptable. Story 2, Mr. and Mrs. Simpson, based on the movie Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The plot of the movie is that 2 assassins are married, but neither of them knows the other is an assassin. This is exactly that. It's no different, really. No better, maybe slightly worse. Though I was not really a fan of the movie. Best parts came when Homer shoots Grandpa to death, and I'll be honest, the Homer-Marge fight was slightly interestingly done. They end up killing Chief Wiggum and sleeping on top of his body. It was fine, I guess. Some of the over-the-top murder was halfway entertaining. It was what it was. Story 3, Heck Town. Original content, but the name might be based on the Richard Matheson novel Hell House. It's Halloween, and Bart, Lisa, Nelson, and Milhouse have been spurned on candy, so they decide, forget treat, it's time for trick. They begin absolutely laying waste to the town, including using water balloons, dog poop, toilet paper, beating people with bats, causing car wrecks, blowing up buildings, etc. The town has had enough, and Flanders says he can handle it. The kids are led to his haunted house, in which we get the reveal of Devil Flanders again, and he tortures the kids, as well as the rest of the town, for all eternity. Yo, no shit. This is one of the best stories I've seen in a long time. It had that macabre horror I've been wanting. The story made sense. We get some kids just sick of it, and it's not a new story. That's a plot we've seen before. I think I recall the new Creep Show doing a story similar to this, which I also enjoyed. Lisa just shaking her head but not stopping any of the activities was funny. The return of Devil Flanders was most welcome. We got some Hernandez Bosch visuals, and I know I butchered that name. Please forgive me. With Hell, which was animated beautifully, and different Springfield characters being tortured throughout. We saw Homer get both killed by spaghetti and a hammock, and I love that he questioned it, didn't the magic spaghetti kill me already? This was a very satisfying story, and one I've been waiting for some time, to be honest. Please, more like this, Simpsons writers. Episode 19 from season 20 in 2008. We open on a drawn-out election day joke. Story 1, Untitled Robot parody based on the Transformers franchise. Bart needs a gift for Lisa for Christmas and buys her a Malibu Stacy car. That is actually some kind of transformer. It's not long until we see there are many Transformers all around town, which begin fighting for reasons that are unclear. Thanks to Marge informing them of this uncertainty, they decide to take over Springfield and turn the residents into human foosball table, much to everyone's lament. There's a part where the Transformer reveals itself to Maggie and no one believes it, but that didn't go anywhere and felt useless. I was never a huge Transformers fan. Certainly not the horrendous movies, though I did watch it as a kid, and I liked Beast Wars, which is CGI, and that did not age well. I expected this to be pretty bad, and it wasn't as bad. Had a few moments of levity. Homer and Ned being stuck in the butts of the Transformers. Homer also informs him he got season 7 of Seinfeld for Christmas, which is probably the best season. The robot fighting was alright, and the foosball part was a fun enough ending. Wasn't anything good, but it will pass for a little Halloween Christmas story. Story number 2, How to Get Ahead in Deadvertising, based slightly on Mad Men. Well, the opening is, it's a long opening that parodies Mad Men, a show I've never really seen, so my appreciation for all this is fairly nil, though it does look nice. The Simpson parents drop off Maggie at a daycare. To comfort her, there are murals of Krusty on the wall. To wit, Krusty comes in to wreck the place for stealing his likeness, a la Disney. Well, Homer doesn't care for someone upsetting his little girl, and after some wackiness, Krusty is killed. This leads to some corporate types hiring Homer to kill more celebrities so they can use their likeness digitally in awful commercials. Homer has proven to be adept at this, but the spirits of those dead have had enough and come down to kill Homer, and he's back in heaven. But we don't get him hanging out with God this time. Absolutely convoluted story, haphazard. It was really bad. The intro was utterly useless, and none of the ads were all that funny. Celebrities they used were pretty dated, even for 2008 standards. Jimmy Stewart, Prince, John Wayne, not really cutting edge there. A few Lincoln is gay jokes went a long way since they kept using them. I thought this was going to be like Homer becomes Krusty, as was the original idea for the series. Something we've seen before with Homie the Clown, but then he goes insane or something and wears Krusty's face. It seems like I'm complaining a lot about this. I guess I can say thanks to the opening, it was fairly short. I liked the beginning with Maggie and Krusty, and they did use Psycho Killer, which is a classic, but yeah, this was pretty bad. Story 3, It's the Grand Pumpkin, Milhouse, based on It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. We get Milhouse looking for the Grand Pumpkin. In doing so, he refuses to go to the school's Halloween party. Lisa supports him on this, despite the mockery of all the other children, but in a turn of events, Milhouse tears make the Great Pumpkin arise, who, upon realizing people deform and eat pumpkins, goes quite mad and begins terrorizing the town, ending up at the school's party. It's there he is stopped by Tom Turkey, the spirit of Thanksgiving, who kills the Grand Pumpkin, but, upon realizing people eat turkeys, proceeds to eat the kids at will. I thought this was great. I am an unabashed fan of Charlie Brown, and the decision to do this with Charles Schultz's style, with a bit of Simpsons thrown in, was really marvelous. Who they picked for all the characters I liked as well, and the music, the walking animation, it was really enjoyable. The story was simple but effective. I would have personally changed one thing, and that is to have a character like Ralph be the one to summon Tom Turkey, as he thinks it's Thanksgiving and not Halloween. That would be very much in line with his character. But overall, this was one of the best ones, at least this week. And episode 20 from season 21, 2009, last episode of the month, really. We get an opening where Universal monsters go to a party, and it pisses off their significant others. Whatever. It was really disinteresting and topical. I also see the Simpsons old TV sent into a flat screen TV. No real issue with that. Just thought I'd point it out. Story number 1, dial M for murder or press pound to return to the main menu. Inexplicably, it's not a reference to dial M for murder, but strangers on a train. Bart offers Lisa a trade. He takes care of Miss Hoover, and she takes care of Mrs. Krabappel. So Lisa ding-dong ditches Edna, and Bart removes Hoover's head. Lisa is rightfully horrified, and Bart insists she kill Edna. She refuses, despite ample ability and opportunity to do so, and ends up killing Bart after an awesome chase sequence I'll come back to. Edna Krabappel helps cover the crime up. First off, the animation change is excellent here. I like the black and white they used. And that's not simply it. The animation itself is much improved. I knew they were using digital animation for a few seasons before this, but they took a big leap into much better looking territory. I'm usually pretty critical of digital animation, as it often, not always, gives everything that sort of glossy sheen I don't care for. Look at Dragon Ball or Z compared to Super. The level of animation is leagues better when it's that rough, hand-drawn style. But shows like The Simpsons or South Park are so stylized that digital animation just works. And here's a great example of how good it can look without losing any of the inherent design it had. We get a wonderful chase sequence with a parody ton of Hitchcock films, some quite literal and some a little more visually interesting. It was the highlight. Bart playing coy as well as stupid suited his character well here, and Lisa having had enough and going mad was a fitting ending with her and Edna getting the last laugh. This is a great start to the last episode. Story number 2, Don't Have a Cow, Mankind. Reference to I Am Legend, Children of Men, 28 Days Later. The new Krusty Burger is a monstrosity, turning everyone who eats it into a zombie. And from that we get typical zombie nonsense, with the Simpsons hanging tight until it's revealed Bart is immune to the meat, so must be taken to the typical safe zone, and with the help of Apu and Rainier Wolfcastle, and of course, those two get killed as well. Simpsons travel on, but Homer is turned, Bart kills him, and they finally make it to the safe place. The army wants to dissect Bart, but they come up with a compromise. And the new civilization just has to eat food Bart bathes in, much to Lisa's chagrin. For a very typical zombie story, it was quite cleverly done. The story beats went by with a lot of decent humor. Homer not letting Grandpa in the house, Wolfcastle being killed right away. And I think this is Rainier's first speaking role in the Treehouse episodes, honestly. But please correct me if I'm wrong. Pooh's betrayal was funny. When they say they're going to cut Bart apart, Marge asks, what kind of civilized people eat the body and blood of their savior? Which makes Reverend Lovejoy sweat. The ending with Bart mocking Lisa and rubbing her bowl seemingly on his genitals. This was solid, entertaining, gory. It felt like a Halloween story, which, as I've said, is what I want. Story number 3, There's No Business Like Mo Business, based on Sweeney Todd, and the last story we'll be looking at for the month. This is framed entirely as a play, with Mo being in love with Marge. And after Homer gets into an accident on Mo's new still, he makes advances at Marge, as well as selling his new Homer brew. Not his words, I just don't know what else to call it. We get some backstage antics. Homer has a gay song, literally, and in the end it turns out Homer isn't dead, just deformed. Him and Marge share a beer made of him. I didn't really get any laughs out of this one, and it felt like it dragged quite a bit. It's not very good. The story doesn't really go anywhere, and the play aspect of it didn't really do anything to engage with the story or the humor. I don't know, it was a pretty weak end to the whole shebang, but this is totally out of my hands here, so let's talk about all this. All right, let's talk about these last 5 episodes. Starting with 16, mediocre, I'd say at best. Even the best story, the Dangerous Game one, was marred by a number of issues that plagued the show around this time. Unnecessary guest stars, lacking tone, writing that bordered on the ludicrous. It has nothing to say and doesn't respect the homage it's trying to be. B.I. was just a generic story with a bad ending and a half-assed beginning. And the last part was not a story at all. It wasn't anything but a few vaguely good ideas the writers had about characters they would like to see dress up. It didn't really work because more than half of them were generic outfits that had nothing to do with the character. I don't know, this felt lazy, underproduced, and most certainly underdelivered. 17, we get a lot more of the same. We had one good story, though this one, The Golem, was the best story thus far this week, which isn't saying much. But we got a non-story, another one, just like 16, didn't have anywhere to go. It didn't go, have anything to say. It's just there for the writers to, I don't really know. I have no idea what they want out of these stories when they don't have a point. It's frustrating to watch. It's frustrating to see that they don't seem to care. The BLOB one was, I've mentioned my issues with celebrity stuff in The Simpsons, and I'm getting the feeling it's going to continue. I'm getting quite disillusioned here, and I'm afraid that I'm not surprised. But to 18, we get a very solid episode. The E.T. story was dependable, hit all the notes, and had a big bombastic ending. It did what it needed to do. The Mr. and Mrs. story, while not my cup of tea, wasn't at all poorly executed, just sort of there. But it's the third story that I absolutely loved. It might be the MVP of this last week. It remains to be seen. but it's certainly the best up until this point. It felt like a classic Simpsons Halloween story with just enough of the modern trappings, i.e., over silliness and stylistic choices to make it work. The art was excellent, and some callbacks to classic artists was even more welcome. Yeah, this episode, I went in looking at the story listing thinking that I was not going to be very satisfied with it, but I was more than pleasantly surprised. It's a 19, another very solid episode, which seems to be a growing theme now. We had 1 week story, much like last episode, but even that was just kind of something you could gloss over, and it had moments where it wasn't bad, just a bit uninspired. I would rate this one lesser than episode 18 due to the fact that the robot story didn't quite hit the heights of the ET one. I think I liked Heck House a little bit more than the Charlie Brown parody. But if this is the way these episodes are going to go, I see a lot of growth within these 2 years. And that's something I'm going to talk about in my wrap up here. But yeah, a very solid and enjoyable episode of Treehouse is number 19. And of course, it's the penultimate one before 20. You know, it really felt like they were hitting their stride again, as I don't think we got this big of a string of good episodes since the second, maybe even the first part of this retrospective. I had heard that the teen chapters were much worse than the stuff that came in the season 20 pluses, and I can't speak to that necessarily, but there's some proof to that in these 5 episodes, where we went from utter crap to something far more interesting and far more, well, Simpsons-like. Dial M and the zombie one far outweighed the Sweetie Todd parody, but that being said, even that wasn't bad, just not my cup of tea, and frankly, I could see how someone would enjoy it. Never been much for Sweeney Todd, and the way they handled the play aspect I felt was poor, but let's finish this all up. These last few episodes make me want to watch more of the Treehouse episodes that I have not seen. So maybe I'll come back to those in future for some content, and man, what a ride this has been. We've seen terrifying lows, dizzying highs, and creamy middles. Sure, I might have offended a few of the blue check marks with my cocky stride and musky odors. I'll never be the darling of the YouTube community who cluck their tongues, stroke their beards, and say, what's to be done with this Daytona Makai? But in reality, I have a huge task ahead of me to figure out where I want all these stories to go, and I'm very excited to get to it, but I'm even more excited for you folks to join me. So be here October 31st to hear my entire review of all the Treehouse of Horror stories from worst to best. There might just be some surprises in there for you. Well, thank you so much for joining me here, folks. I appreciate every single one of you, and I hope you have a spooky Halloween. Don't forget to add me on Instagram under Demon Peaks for Twin Peaks memes. Get on my Patreon to tell me what you want me to review, or support me for as little as $1, just $1. And please be here on Halloween, like I mentioned, for the big review, the big list. This has been the Total Makai. Once again, thank you very much, and goodbye.